is on the air with Laura Dwyer-Schlecke, Mark Meyer, Jackie Austin, and a special guest today.
He's always special. Oh, look, 2 mics. Does that mean I come over twice or I
Yes.
echo?
Yeah, you sound good.
Bill Schlechte, attorney extraordinaire, specializes in real estate.
But how would they reach us if they had any questions?
787-3397. So if you have some questions, call, or you can email Mark. His computer's on. Mark at thinkingrealestate.com.
Mark with a C.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, it doesn't. All right.
No,
Okay.
we're on it.
All right. Very good.
We're high tech.
All right.
So, Mark, what did you want to talk about? And then
What's the
Bill said,
topic?
I'm coming in.
Real estate.
Well, there was
Wow.
a new law
That's a
that.
shocker. We haven't talked about that in a couple of
Well,
months.
this is a lifestyle show.
Yeah.
So we talk about more than real estate.
Right.
Let's
Well,
start. Let's start.
Kind of the city and
Let's start with you, Laura.
oh wow.
Oh, Mark's
Let's
taking
start with
control.
you.
Mark's getting aggressive. What, Mark?
Let's put on your city council hat for a second.
Okay, Todd.
Tell us what happened at the city council meeting on Tuesday with regard to foreclosures.
There's a new ordinance that was adopted for foreclosures, abandoned and vacant homes, and they have to register the properties.
Who has to? What if it's abandoned and
owners.
vacant?
The
How is
owner.
this going to be enforced?
Wow, you got
You're right on it. The community development department's going to be the enforcer.
Well, that doesn't make sense, though.
I voted against the ordinance because I didn't think it was well written. I think it's a good idea in theory, but I think there's some things that need to be changed. However, I was outvoted, so.
So the point of that ordinance is to keep track of those houses that are A, foreclosed, B, abandoned, or C, vacant?
And to make sure that they're not harboring homeless people and squatters.
So if I have a house listed for sale because I'm a real estate agent,
right?
and my seller has moved to Vista Grand Villa and that house is vacant, they have to then register this house with the city?
If it's vacant for, I believe, 6 months or more, might be 90 days. I'd have to double check the ordinance.
And what happens if they don't?
They'll get a fine. The registration fee is $300.
To register a vacant house.
wow. That seems pretty steep, Laura.
Excessive
Yeah.
is a word I used at the city council meeting.
Why-
I think they're more interested
Did anybody
in
use the word silly?
Well, it's not silly in some respects. It's not really silly in some respects. There's a provision in that ordinance that actually, in my opinion, as a lawyer, is dangerous. It requires posting of a notice 18 inches by 24 inches in the window so that it's visible from 45 feet, giving the name and contact information in the event that there's an emergency, which in and of itself is a good idea, except now what I'm doing is I'm advertising to any potential thief, vandal, or squatter that this is a vacant property. There are other due process issues in terms of what constitutes abandonment and what's unoccupied and what's occupied. I mean, I reviewed the ordinance after Laura told me it was being considered, and from a lawyer's point of view, I think there are numerous issues and problems with it as well, Mark. And I'm saying that as a lawyer, not as the husband of a city council person, but I agree with you. I think it's fraught with issues and difficulties.
So it could be better written, Bill.
It could be better written. I mean, there are some. I think the definition of abandoned needs to be better defined. Unoccupied, occupied. We need to define what occupied is. So
if somebody
moves
leaves
to
their
Vista,
furniture in their house, is that occupied or unoccupied?
Or is it
if they keep
vacant?
it as, if people have gone to Florida for 6 months, is that occupied or
well,
unoccupied?
that falls under the housing part, which they believe they addressed. I think by if you're not occupying, I can't remember now if it was 6 or 9 months.
As a
that
real
got
estate
changed.
broker, is that going to be my responsibility? And if
Well,
I've got a for sale sign out front for 6 months, is that 18 by 24 sign with my name and phone number and address on my for sale sign, is that adequate for the 18 by 24 sign of notification?
Well, it's whoever is designated as the person with responsibility to respond to these sorts of things. Again, it is fraught with difficulty. That's only one of the potential issues. The first question is is the ordinance even necessary in light of the housing codes, which already apply to any property, whether it's abandoned, vacant, etc.? I really am more concerned about the due process issues. If you look at the foreclosure statute, in order for a mortgagee to deem a property abandoned for purposes of foreclosure, they have to post the property with notice that it's being considered abandoned. The owner then has a period of 14 or 15 days in which to write to the mortgagee saying, no, it's not abandoned, because even though I may not have my furniture in it, I intend on coming back, or I intend on renting it or something else. So the definition of vacant and unoccupied within the ordinance is very vague, and I think is subject to a potential due process challenge. But as far as responsibility goes, yeah, there's going to be a real issue as to who is responsible if something goes amiss with that particular property.
But as a real estate agent, is my responsibility to my seller, it sounds to me as though the city is saying, and I could be wrong because we don't have, other than Laura here, anybody that to answer this question, is my responsibility going to go beyond my fiduciary duty to my seller contractually? Am I then responsible to the city to notify them? I mean,
the ordinance doesn't define what the responsibility is of the person designated by the owner, but the first part of your question or comment is, yes, it goes beyond what you have agreed to do as a listing agent on behalf of the seller if you allow the seller to name you as the responsible party under the ordinance. So you're gonna want to add that to your contract, provide for indemnity from the seller to you in the event that there is some liability attached for anything that might go wrong with that property while you are the responsible person.
I do think it does define the responsibilities of the responsible agent.
Of the broker.
Of the
agent
of the seller. The reason they have a responsible agent is so that you are the person that they can contact to get access to the property and notify of any problems that may be existing on the property. So it does define that within the ordinance, I believe.
Yeah, but that's only as between the city and the responsible party.
Right.
That has nothing to do with the responsibilities between the owner
That's right.
and the
That
agent.
would be my concern as well. And so it sounds to me that if, as a listing agent, I have a contract to sell a house with someone, and my, let's say it lasts 7 months, at day 6 month and a day, my responsibility has changed.
And who's got the responsibility to pay the $300 registration fee, 50% fine if you don't do it within how many days? 30 days? Or 45?
30.
30 days. I mean,
And the appeal process, I think, was only 3 days. I didn't like that.
One of the other issues, too, in the ordinance, they wrote a provision that says the city housing department has a responsibility to monitor the property for a period that extends no longer than 30 days. In other words, what the ordinance does, it imposes an affirmative duty on the city at a time when the city is scrapping for money. How is it going to hire and pay all of the housing inspectors that would be necessary to monitor, at least on a 30-day basis, all of the properties that are vacant or unoccupied? Like I say, you have to go back to the reason for the ordinance. Is it necessary in the first instance? And second, is it well written? And then third, does it impose some economic responsibilities on a municipality at a time when it's struggling for tax dollars?
Well, and I think that one of the things that concerns me as just a Jackson County resident is that the city had already enacted a landlord registration, which would take,
And vacant home.
which would encompass a lot of this already. So I'm confused as to
Sounds like a pile-on.
Well, and it's confusing to me, and it's also confusing to me as a real estate broker how I'm supposed to respond to this to my sellers and to people and to my buyers. What do I tell them if they're buying income properties in the city of Jackson?
Well, that's easy. Tell them to consult a lawyer. Look, you and I was invited here to talk about the new rodent statute, with respect to riparian rights. And you started this, but I can tell you that I had this debate with Laura and others with respect to the rental registry as well. I'm not persuaded, and again, I'm saying this as a lawyer who does nothing but real estate law, and I represent tons of landlords. I'm not persuaded that the rental registry was an ordinance that was necessary either. But it's there, and I guess we have to deal with it, and it imposes responsibilities on owners and their agents that did not exist before. It imposes potential penalties, and again, it too imposes additional economic burden on the municipality that it didn't need to do, that it really did not need to do. And the state statute actually went the other way. State statute required inspections every 2 years, and then that statute was changed to provide that the municipality had to do it only every 3 years.
Well, I have to say, I am in favor of the rental registry, and I think that was revised. There are a few changes that still need to be made, and I'm meeting with the deputy manager
Thank God this isn't
soon
pillow
to get
talk.
these things written. So, but I think, I mean, for example, there's a house across the street from my mother that was a duplex. Nobody knew it was a duplex. Now it's a foreclosure, and they're marketing it as a duplex. She's in a single family. She's in an R1 neighborhood. That home was a rental property, a non-conforming rental property.
But you already had an ordinance that dealt with it. The zoning ordinance says it's prohibited. You had the ability, the municipality had the ability to go ahead and cite that particular property as being a non-conforming.
But they didn't know about it.
Wait a second, but
It looks like a single family 2-story house from the outside.
But they found out about it before the registry. You knew about it before the registry.
No, they only found out about it because it came up as a foreclosure and it's marketed as a duplex. It's the only way they found out
Yeah, but
about
they
it.
found out. My point here, Laura, is they found out about it. The rental registry was. Let's not go there. Let's talk about road ends, because I am married to Laura Dwyer Schlechte, and I don't want to get into an argument. From a husband's point of view, it's a losing battle.
Before you start, are you taking calls, Mark?
Sure.
Good morning. Well, you know, if we get a call,
787-3397.
we'll pass that along to you.
So,
They didn't see any end of that. They didn't see any end of that conversation, so they gave up.
right.
Well, what's the deal with the road ends, Bill?
Let's talk about lakes.
Lakes?
Let's talk about it in particular.
we have-
Wait, there's the caller.
Do you have a question?
I do. Hey, Bill, I didn't want to get you in trouble, so I hung up.
Oh, he's far beyond that point.
Hey, you did make a very good point. You might as well put a big sign in the yard saying, "Come and get my copper, because I'm not home."
That's exactly right.
Right, and that's what one of the agents
And
did.
Laura, I don't necessarily agree with you with the rental register. It just feels to me like, once again, we all want our neighborhoods nicer, and who doesn't? And it's easy for me to say, I want my neighborhood nicer. You, Mr. Landlord, you get to pay for that. And then Marty's statement the other day on the radio was this: well, you're getting more rent. Well, I don't even address that. You get a higher rent. You can't pay the rent now. So anyway, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, hey, thank
and
you.
the rental registry doesn't have anything to do with a landlord's ability to on how much rent they get. I mean, I can only get the rent I get.
Well, no, you
I only get market rate.
You see,
so.
what the mayor was saying. If it's a nicer neighborhood, you're going to get more rent.
Well, you're still only going to get what the market
Possibly.
would bear. But
Well, yeah.
you're right. But the point of the registry is so we have ways to communicate, minimize the cost to both landlords and the government, to the city. But I want to point out that it's not, they just started with the landlords. Probably, I'm guessing eventually everybody will be affected.
Mark, are you taking calls?
Sure, but I want to make one more point before
Sure.
you take that call.
Yeah.
When we have 51% of the houses in the city of Jackson that are non-owner occupied, excuse me, the city has to do something, and I, is this it? Okay, that's fine. As a real estate agent and as, someone who helps sellers and buyers with this stuff, okay, we'll just deal with it. So, and I can understand why they want to do that, but it seems to me that there are enough mechanisms in place that should not have to affect the other 49%.
The other question I would have on the 300, did they just pull that out of the sky? Are they trying to cover an expense with that $300?
Well, technically, they have to cover, it has to be justified. That's why the rental registry's numbers are what they are, because it's the cost of administration.
But why
I
are
don't know
those-
how they
but
came
why
up
are
with the
those numbers
cost.
so much different?
Yeah,
than
that
those?
that seems reasonable.
Very valid question, and I don't know the answer to
Okay.
that. So.
Are you taking calls?
Yes.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Greg. I'm wondering how much of
don't
the
think that's it.
inspectors, city justify our inspection department. So really, it's a necessity versus dollar argument is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, and that's a very fair question, and one that a lot of people are asking. If you look at the numbers, there's no way that the numbers can justify hiring another inspector based on the increase in the inspection fees. The inspection fee only went up $50. The rental registry will pay for the cost of administration, not of an inspector. However, necessity is what it really is. I was driving past a home last night for a client, went down an alley, and in the backyard of the house behind the house that was for sale, trash galore.
Yeah, but you already
those
have an
are-
ordinance
exactly.
to deal with that,
And-
Laura.
and-
Does that affect light or garbage pile up? And I'm wondering why we need a full canon approach to what we already have on the books for sufficient laws, that's all.
We have to remember that the ordinance was the housing, the second part of the ordinance was the housing ordinance, and that was simply updated to match a lot of the state codes, because it was antiquated. It hadn't been touched since the early 90s, is what I am told.
Thanks for that question, and my personal opinion is, and we haven't talked about this, but this is not a money-making operation for the city. This is a way for the city to get under control things that are happening in Jackson. And if you drive down some of the streets, you'll already see houses that have been taken down that needed to be taken down. That's all good and fine. I just think this is a bit excessive. And Bill, let's talk about...
Are you taking calls, Mark? Good morning.
Sure.
I'm about ready to give up and go move into a cave.
Okay, that's not like a
Make sure it
comment.
has electricity.
That's not like a comment.
So in Jackson County, we have lots of lakes, and there are houses which have we have lakes which have houses offshore that have always had the right to have docks and boats at the end of the roads.
Well, no, they haven't always had that right. Let's back up a little bit, because the riparian law in Michigan it dates back to when we became a state in 1836 or 1837. I mean, and then we're talking about a law that existed even before then under the English common law. But here's why we want to talk about it. There's a brand new statute adopted March 22nd, signed into law on March 22nd, that deals with road ends, and it's a product of a decision up on Higgins Lake a few years ago, in which the Michigan Supreme Court held that a road end which is owned or controlled by a municipality is public property and therefore provides public access to what would otherwise be a private lake. Now that incensed the adjoining private property owners, who now found that their otherwise private lake, or formerly private lake, was now accessible by the public. That decision still stands. So what the legislature has done is adopted a statute which now says, okay, that's fine. If you have a road which ends at a body of water, that road end is controlled by the township, or the township has the ability to control that road end. The statute is now, it's Act number 56, Public Acts of 2012, and without reciting it chapter and verse, it essentially says that no private property owner can put a dock or other improvement or otherwise impede access to the water where it is a road end which is, I'm going to start, initially owned by a public entity, a township, a city, a village, or the county. In most circumstances, like out in Clark Lake, it's actually the county that owns it, and it's controlled by the county road commission. The problem with this statute, and it was pointed out to me by Ron Ellison at American Title, I want to give him his credit here.
His 2 seconds of fame.
Yeah, because when we look at public roads, and I just finished a thing out on Clark Lake involving one of these, but the road end, even though it was platted, had never been improved by the county road commission or the township. And in fact, a backlot owner, not somebody on the lake, was putting a dock out there and a boat hoist every year. And so the issue now came before the township as to who has the right to do what. It was actually decided before the statute was adopted. But the statute, unfortunately, says that it applies to public roads, and then it defines a public road as, it means a county road or a township, city, or village street that is open for use by the public. And so it's that open for use by the public that now is an ambiguity within the statute. So we don't know whether or not it applies to all publicly owned or controlled road ends, or whether it's only those that have actually been opened up for road purposes by the public entity. This is a good example of, again, what I'll consider poorly drafted legislation. Somebody didn't think ahead, there's an ambiguity, and you can apply that to a lot of things. You can apply it to the registry ordinance here in Jackson, you can apply it to the new foreclosure ordinance, now you can apply it to the road end statute. I wish we had more time to talk about who can do what to whom.
Why don't you come back next week?
Maybe next week if I'm here. I don't know if I'm in court or not. I'll have to find out.
Although, aren't we into the Easter coming up here soon?
Yeah,
But at any rate, there are all kinds of issues that...
There's never a holiday on this show.
I know.
Yeah.
Well,
The show
there's too
goes
much
on.
news
Yeah.
for there to be a
There's
break.
There's a lot of news.
Well, we have to cut you off, unfortunately.
Do it.
So I've got some open houses. We've got another price reduction, first of all, at 230 North Forbes. Someone needs to come in and buy that. I think actually might have someone interested, so hopefully we can get that one together. Open houses from 1 to 230, 5990 Updike Road.
5995.
Sorry, 5995 Updike. That's the corner of Seymour and Updike. Listed for $194,900. It's a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. It is a really nice house. There's a couple bedrooms on the lower level and the main bedroom's on the first level, so very interesting floor plan, huge rooms. 11097 Sauk Trail at $95,000. That's out at Somerset.
3 to 4:30.
I'm sorry, Lake Leanne.
3 to 4:30.
That one's 1 to 230, and it's a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, clean as a whistle house. And then 3 to 430 is 3889 Kirkwood, 123.9, 3 bedrooms, 1.5 bath, and 8036 Sharon in Western Schools at $80,000, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath.
For information, call this number.
780-3800 or go to our website at thinkingrealestate.com.